Hajime no Ippo has reached chapter 1500 in the manga, and what better way to celebrate it than by looking back at what has happened every 100 chapters of the series. Of course, we start with chapter 100, then 200, 300 and so on, all the way until chapter 1500. Now then, let's begin the video. In chapter 100, Ippo's fist had come back to life, with all the guys feeling extremely excited. If you don't remember the context, this happened during Ippo's fight against Sendo in the final of the All Japan Rookie Tournament, while Ippo was still recovering from the broken fist he suffered against Ryo Mashiba. Ippo had finally managed to overcome it, and on the cover, we could see all the secondary characters appearing alongside the guys from the gym as a tribute to reaching this milestone number. Finally, Ippo was attacking, landing the first blows against Takeshi Sendo. Remember, this was the very first fight between them, the one that took place in Osaka, with the entire crowd fired up. Ippo even managed to connect the first punches, ending the first round this way. He was completely determined now and could finally use his right hand again. Sendo, of course, was also extremely excited to face such a powerful boxer, having his aura moments right from the start. Like this scene where he even seems to have a kind of aura behind him. The chapter ended with Takeshi Sendo beginning his attack in the second round, of course starting with a smash, and then another one right after, which landed cleanly on Ippo. We move on to chapter 200. The bell had just rung for a very interesting fight. For the Japanese featherweight title, Takeshi Sendo appears once again, this time facing Vorg Zangief. On the cover, we had something like a popularity contest, showing many of the most beloved characters. This is chapter 200, a legendary one, the Tiger and the Wolf. In this chapter, we saw the first round of this fight. Maybe for us now it's not as shocking, but imagine reading this week by week back then. Sendo vs Vorg, what an absolute madness that must have been at the time. We got to see Vorg's dominance, how he was able to corner Sendo and give him a complete beating, landing multiple punches on the Tiger. But our boxer from Naniwa, with a smash, managed to put the fight back on even ground, turning it for a moment into a one-sided exchange in his favor. Sendo's series of smashes began to make Vorg waver, but Vorg wasn't going to give up, responding with the white fang, and in Ippo's eyes, Vorg recognized the same determination he had seen before in his past rivals, as strong as that of Eiji Date. In chapter 300 we saw Ippo at home, very quiet and withdrawn. He hadn't been able to sleep at all the previous night. There was also a popularity poll for best episodes, which I'll leave the image of here in case you want to pause and check it out. Of course, the manga is very old, so the image isn't the best quality, but you can still recognize it. Ippo was heading to the Korakuen Hall for a fight. If you don't recall which one, it was his first defense of the Japanese title. He had promised Umezawa he would not fail and would win by knockout. However, his mother noticed that Ippo's attitude was not like usual. She even went so far as to say Ippo might lose, because throughout all the lead up to this match, Ippo had been very nervous and anxious. His opponent was Kazuki Sanada, a boxer who was not only very talented and strong, but had already been the junior featherweight champion, a division below Ippo's. He had defended his belt multiple times and wanted a bigger challenge, so he moved up a weight class to challenge Ippo. His trainer was also an old friend of the coach, someone very talented. Right before the fight, both boxers made their way to the ring, but the moment Ippo saw the lights, he was stunned. His heart couldn't calm down, and neither could his mind. He was completely disoriented. Even Takamura noticed how much pressure Ippo was feeling. Our Japanese champion simply couldn't focus, and his face even showed a trace of fear. In chapter 400, we had a popularity poll for the characters. It wasn't revealed exactly in this chapter, but rather in this volume. The chapter itself is titled A Long Time Ago. Although this part of the story was covered in the anime, it was done quite differently. Here, the fight between Takamura and Brian Hawk had just ended, and all the guys from the gym went to the mountains in the middle of winter covered in snow to visit Nekota, of course, along with Kamogawa. Much like in the anime, Takamura had gone off doing his own thing, wandering far away and basically causing trouble as usual. During all this casual conversation, Ippo spotted a photograph of a young woman, and he was very surprised. Kamogawa then revealed the real reason they had gone to the mountain. It was to see her. We learned there was an altar for this woman in another room at Nekota's home, and Kamogawa confessed that her name was Yuki and that she had died very young. Nekota and the coach started bickering, of course, but what was really interesting was the curiosity the gym members had about this story. Nekota said that even Gen-chan, that's Kamogawa, had been one of the best and had the potential to become a world champion. This shocked Aoki and Ippo, but because of various injuries, Kamogawa couldn't follow that path. Ippo felt sad about it, but the coach was happy nonetheless because his dreams had come true when he saw Takamura with the championship belt. Nekota also talked about how Takamura's fight against Brian Hawk had brought back old memories. Seeing Takamura fight an American was like going back in time to what Gen-chan had done. Aoki was stunned to hear that the coach had fought an American right after the war, but Kamogawa clarified that it wasn't a title fight or anything like that. Then came the flashback, sparked by that famous photograph. What I like about how the manga handles the flashback is that it gives more recognition from the very start to the fact that there were three friends, including Dankichi, who was Sanada's trainer, the same boxer Ippo fought back in chapter 300 that we just mentioned. In the manga's current timeline, Dankichi is the one training Vorg Zangief. From here, the rest is exactly the same as we saw in the anime, with the appearance of that blonde soldier, Anderson, the American soldier. Now we jump to chapter 500. Ippo had just destroyed Sawamura Ryuhei with a brutal combination. This was the round 500, and on the cover we saw a double-page spread of various characters running, including Wampo and even the bear Takamura defeated. If you remember, this was basically the ending sequence from the third season. Sawamura awakened and began attacking Ippo, showing off his natural talent, landing counters without even thinking. Ippo responded by using the Dempsey roll as his last resort. Although Sawamura managed to stop his counter just as Ippo stopped Dempsey, timing himself to fit in a counter, Sawamura's talent was so incredible. But Ippo, as the last memento, dodged the counter by diving low and preparing the Dempsey roll from below. The chapter ended right before Ippo's last Dempsey roll. In chapter 600, on the cover, we could see Miyata, Vorg Zangief, Sawamura, Eiji Date, Takeshi Sendo, Ippo, and Mashiba. In this chapter, we were at the final of the East Japan Rookie Tournament in the featherweight division, but of a generation different from Ippo's. It was Manabu Itagaki facing Imai Kyosuke. Basically, it was like a Miyata versus Ippo, but from the new generation. We could see Itagaki fighting with his footwork, dodging all the very powerful punches that his opponent was throwing. It was quite an intense match, and Itagaki was definitely feeling the pressure of avoiding those powerful blows at close range. And the end of this chapter, the big revelation, so to speak, was that finally Itagaki, who stood out as a long-distance boxer moved in and decided to trade punches against Imai Kyosuke as if he were an infighter, just like Ippo. Now, chapter 700. Honestly, in my opinion, it's one of the more boring ones. It takes place right after the fight between Sawamura Ryuhei and Ryo Mashiba. It was confirmed that Sawamura would retire due to the accident he had. On the cover, we saw many of the main characters in a fishing boat celebrating chapter 700, and even a shark fin was visible. There was a lot of talk about Sawamura's retirement, and the funny part was how Kimura reacted. For him, this meant he had gotten rid of two strong boxers, Sawamura because he retired, and Mashiba because he was suspended for cheating. Of course, the suspension was only temporary, about a year, but Ippo was still quite upset with Kimura's attitude, because regardless of their differences, Ippo respected both fighters. Well, to be honest, Ippo respects everyone. Later, Ippo had a conversation with Itagaki, still feeling a bit annoyed and resentful towards Kimura after everything they talked about. I'm going to skip most of the dialogues here, you can read them yourself if you want, but the most iconic part of the chapter was the announcement that the Kamogawa gym members would have a baseball game. Chapter 800. I still remember the day I read it. Ippo was in the ring facing Randy Boy Jr., one of my favorite characters. The chapter cover read, "To be strong." What does it really mean? I still haven't found the answer, and featured Mashiba, Miyata, Sawamura, Takeshi Sendo, Vorg Zangief, and Ricardo Martinez. The sparring between Ippo and Randy Boy Jr. was about to begin. Remember, Ippo had a lot of tension towards Randy Boy Jr. because he basically took away his chance to fight Miyata in the professional ring. Just as they were about to start, Mr. Sakaguchi, Randy Boy Jr.'s trainer, stepped in and separated them. He had previously offered Ippo the chance to fight Randy, but Ippo had rejected it because the condition was that Randy first had to beat Miyata, and Ippo was certain Miyata would win. Because of this, they didn't let him spar with Randy, just the promise of a professional match if Miyata ever lost. Feeling awful and frustrated, Ippo was left alone in the ring. Outside the gym, Mr. Sakaguchi gave Randy a big speech about everything he had to do, which made Randy angry enough to grab him by the tie. Randy was basically using Mr. Sakaguchi to achieve his goal, and once he succeeded, he planned to throw him aside. Sakaguchi agreed, as long as it meant they could destroy Ichiro Miyata. Randy was determined to defeat both Ippo and Miyata, and the chapter ended with Ippo heading back to his gym, deeply troubled. We arrive at chapter 900, where Shonen Magazine welcomed us with a special Ippo-themed cover celebrating the occasion. The author also gave us a recap very similar to what I'm doing in this video, showing highlights from chapters 1, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, and 800, and announcing a special commemorative figure for the anniversary. There were also several full-color illustrations of epic moments from the series. We could see Ippo versus Date, Ippo with Umezawa, and more. It truly felt like a celebration worthy of 900 chapters. The chapter itself wasn't particularly thrilling. The story moved to the Class A tournament, but again from a newer generation, Manabu Itagaki's. Of course, Aoki and Kimura were also set to participate, but the main focus here was on Itagaki. He was about to face an old opponent of Ippo's, Karasawa. Karasawa was actually the very first rival Ippo had, who was never animated and can only be seen in the manga. He was also a friend of Sanada, whom we mentioned earlier. Honestly, there wasn't much excitement in this chapter beyond the appearances of various familiar characters, and Ippo reminiscing about when he himself competed in the Class A tournament, the one where he fought Vorg Zangief. Ippo acknowledged that this tournament is where truly powerful boxers meet. the chapter ended with Itagaki stepping into the ring, determined to surpass Ippo's record by defeating Karasawa even faster than his senpai had done. Then came chapter 1000, which was also celebrated with a shonen magazine cover. Being such a monumental milestone, many other manga authors congratulated George Morikawa with exclusive illustrations. Artists like Chiba Tetsuya, the illustrator of Ashita no Joe. I won't go through every single tribute here, but I'll be showing the images so you can appreciate them. I might even upload them as a short video for those who don't watch this full one, so they can see that this commemoration exists. Figures were also announced, and I can assure you, today they must be incredibly expensive. As for the chapter itself, we were in the 4th round of the fight between Vorg Zangief and Mike Elliott, a truly worthy chapter 1000. Remember that Vorg had practically no time to prepare for this match. He had serious trouble making weight and lacked proper training. He was being outclassed by the champion, who had studied him thoroughly and was in perfect condition. We could see how Vorg was being overwhelmed and badly hurt. What had been done to him during the lead-up was incredibly dirty. As the round ended, Ippo and Sendo, watching from Japan, were deeply worried. They could clearly see the bad shape Vorg was in. He even showed signs of cyanosis, a condition that turns your face a bluish purple due to lack of oxygen. For the world champion Mike Elliott, the fight was already won. But Vorg still had something left, the Yamato Damashi, the spirit of the samurai. As the 5th round began, for everyone, the final one, the chapter ended with a chilling panel of Vorg Zangief unleashing the wolf within him. Chapter 1100 began with the 2nd round of the world title fight, or more precisely, a unification match for the middleweight belts. The WBC champion Mamoru Takamura versus the WBA champion Richard Bison. We saw Takamura dealing with a barrage of flicker jabs from his opponent, struggling to find a way in and being forced to take several punches. Every time he tried to close the distance, he was pushed back, showing just how skilled the American was, absolutely deserving of his world title. Takamura wasn't sure what to do, remembering a conversation he had with Kamogawa where he had asked, "What am I supposed to do?" And Kamogawa replied, "Why don't you ask him?" Understanding the meaning, Takamura took on the stance for flicker jabs himself. In chapter 1200, we move straight to Ippo's fight against Antonio Guevara. Ippo was dodging Guevara's right jabs, but still taking a few hits. Even so, with determination in his eyes, he refused to give up and began targeting Guevara's body. He connected a right to the face of his opponent, then followed with an uppercut that knocked him down. Ippo stood in the neutral corner, watching as the Filipino boxer got back on his feet, almost on the verge of collapse. The crowd was entirely behind Ippo. Guevara was about to crumble, but Ippo, with a sad look toward Kamogawa, went straight for his opponent. Slipping through those jabs, he landed a body shot on Antonio Guevara, then a right hand that trapped him against the ropes. The narrator ended the chapter with the line, "Now is the moment, Ippo, go for it." Chapter 1300 opened with a double color spread. Ippo was in Mexico during the match between Takeshi Sendo and Alfredo Gonzalez. The Tiger, or the Mexican Reaper, only one could challenge the world. We saw both exchanging punches in the center of the ring in an incredibly violent fight that had everyone stunned. Sendo was taking hits but kept fighting back, ending the 2nd round looking slightly dizzy. He was surprised by the way his opponent exchanged punches. Very different from Ippo's style, and even from Vorg Zangief's. Nargo and Ricardo Martinez, watching the fight, explained Alfredo's strategy of hiding inside Sendo's left side, the same tactic Nargo himself had tried against Sendo. Ricardo Martinez even mentioned the fighting spirit shown by Date and by Ippo in his own match against Alfredo. Ricardo noted that the Tiger still had much more to give. The third round began with another furious exchange. Sendo was closing the gap more and more, even managing to graze his opponent with punches. The fight was so intense that the crowd began stomping their feet in unison, making the entire arena shake. Ippo recognized this as being like Lollapalooza, just like his own second fight against Sendo. The chapter ended with Arena Mexico rumbling non-stop. In chapter 1400, we were in the middle of Wally's fight against Ricardo Martinez. 3 rounds had already passed, and Wally looked a bit bored because Ricardo hadn't done anything besides study him. The 4th round began with Wally unleashing a rain of punches, bouncing off the ropes to throw blows from unusual positions, even landing a jumping uppercut. When Ricardo tried to counterattack, Wally dodged using the ropes again, completely humiliating the champion, then kept running and hiding, making Ricardo realize he was in a jungle. Wally, like a primitive hunter, was hiding and setting traps. But he eventually got bored of this, standing tall in the center of the ring and calling out, "Come on, champion!" completely provoking Ricardo. Sendo stood up and applauded. This was exactly what he wanted to see, as Wally's face turned serious. We got a flashback to Ricardo's trainer, Bill Stewart, who had seen Wally's tape and put him in this fight. He admitted he had accidentally put his champion in front of a genius. Ricardo was now ready to enter the heart of the jungle and begin the exchange. Finally, chapter 1500, the most recent one at the time of making this video. Once again, Ricardo Martinez was in the ring, but this time facing Takeshi Sendo, a character who has appeared a lot throughout this video. Ricardo had studied enough and in the very first round landed his rifle, his right hand, a devastating counter that silenced the crowd and sent Takeshi Sendo to the canvas. Everyone was shocked, even Takamura. Sendo was down, the crowd was in disbelief, but Ricardo wasn't in perfect condition either. His arms trembled from blocking so many of the Tiger's punches. Ippo was stunned that even someone as tough and strong as Sendo couldn't last 5 minutes against Ricardo. On the count of 8, Sendo finally stood up, determined to keep going and take the belt to his grandmother, who was in the hospital. Sendo charged straight at Ricardo, taking a jab and then landing a left against the world champion. But as he prepared his right, Ricardo, who had already studied him thoroughly, landed another devastating counter, knocking Sendo down for the second time in the same round. And that's where chapter 1500 ended, along with this video on what has happened in Hajime no Ippo every 100 chapters. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe for more Hajime no Ippo videos every week, especially now that we won't have new manga chapters for a while, so you can keep getting content about your favorite series. Good night, champ!